Have you ever experienced a head injury you thought was relatively minor, but as you progress in life, you're speaking with others, they know something has happened, something is different about you. Listen to how Kelly became aware of a concussion and worked her way through the various aspects of the concussion to lead a very successful life. Hi there, and thank you for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast. We feature those who are in the process of overcoming or have overcome any type of life encounter, life obstacle that at the time seemed to be almost insurmountable. With this podcast, we have three objectives in mind. Our first objective is we want you to know with a confident resolve you are not alone. We want to work with you. We want you to know there are others who are working with you, who want to help you through whatever you are encountering, and together we will get through whatever you're experiencing.
Our second objective is there are multiple options for any life encounter you are facing. We want to help you develop a resolve that there are various options and solutions to any life dilemma.
Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you're encountering something that was possibly a decision you made sometime in the past, and if you had the opportunity for a life redo, you would make a different decision. We want to help you with those critical thinking skills that can help you make an informed decision and not encounter what you're going through at the moment. We are the Cooper Culture, a veteran-owned business. We work with business personnel and families to develop and sustain connected relationship cultures within their families and organizations. That type organization is one where people feel wanted, appreciated, and genuinely a part of that organization. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty, who is helping me facilitate this podcast. Today we feature Kelly Tuttle, who describes to us how she experienced what she thought was a mild head injury, but as she worked with her associates at work and family members, she discovered the head injury was more of a concussion, and it took quite a while to recover from and compensate for some of the things that she was experiencing from the head injury, which turned out to be, was diagnosed as a concussion. And it's amazing how the brain can recover from this type of situation. Marty, what are some takeaways we can gain from Kelly and her life situation?
Kelly explains this injury really well, but I didn't realize with a brain injury, people can mask it because either they don't want to go to the doctor or they want to think that they can get through it somehow, but they mask it. And I didn't think you could mask a brain injury, but as she explains, you can. But then she explains so well what you do to help regenerate the brain. And that's like exercise. And the one thing she said was, do something that you've never done and you feel like it's the hardest thing in the world and you couldn't do it, but do it because that helps the brain regenerate.
The brain has the ability to recover from a lot of different things. Great, interesting podcast. Let's listen and learn together. Kelly, it is great to have you with us. Our listeners are going to be very interested in knowing just a little bit of a very severe accident you had in 2015, but that was traumatic enough that it kept you from work for a while, and you had to recover from the trauma of that accident. And how do you, I'll use the term, it seems, how did you mentally prepare yourself to go back into the workforce? Did you maybe lose any confidence? Did you have maybe PTSD? Any of those kind of things. But our listeners are going to be very interested, Kelly, in how you recovered. Great to have you with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and share my story.
Kelly, walk us through a little bit of what the accident was in 2015 and just give our listeners somewhat of a top level of what it was you experienced so they can identify with exactly what it is you recovered from.
So I was driving home after work, and as I was driving down a rural road, another driver suddenly pulled out in front of me, and I was unable to stop on time before I T-boned that car. And it was a pretty bad accident. My car engine was smoking. There was glass everywhere, smashed cars. People were leaving their houses to come out and see what had happened and if they could help. And an ambulance was called, and when the ambulance came and the highway patrol officers came, they checked on me and asked me if I was okay. And I said yes, because I thought, hey, this is a pretty bad car accident, but I'll shake it off and get back to my life, in a couple weeks. I went to work the next day and I work with nurses and I wasn't talking right. In fact, we were going to go out and get some coffee and after on our break, and I said, "Hey, let's go get some Star Trek." And they're like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's get some Star Trek." And they're like, "You just said Star Trek." And I was like, "No, I said Starbucks." And promptly after that, I was given a lecture that I should see my regular doctor the next day, and I did so. I saw my primary care provider and was diagnosed with a concussion and kind of sent home thinking I'd be better in 2 weeks. I was taken off work for 2 weeks, and then after that time, I tried again to return back to my regular life. I pushed and I pushed and I pushed. I had headaches. I had severe whiplash. I had difficulty with memory. I lost my self-awareness, knowing my limits and my abilities. And I had sleep issues. I did have some PTSD, and I just thought I would get better, and I kept pushing more. And I eventually, 3 months later, fell asleep at the wheel. And I woke up just in time to slam my brakes on and prevent running into a tree. Now you would think I would have called my doctor and let my doctor know. Oh, no, no, no. I decided I would just take a nap halfway in between work. This is how my brain was working, not very well. And then I met a colleague who was a nurse practitioner who worked in neurology. She was very curious about my recovery and asked me, "How are you doing?" And I mentioned falling asleep at the wheel. And she said, "No, that's not good. You need to see a neurologist, see a physical medicine and rehab doctor, and get a brain scan." So at this point, none of that had been done. And shortly after that, I did have an appointment with a physical medicine rehab doctor. They're also known as physiatrists. And she recognized that I had a moderate to mild brain injury. And she got me on the right road of recovery. She took me off work for at least 3 months and got me to speech therapy, neurotherapy, and physical therapy. And I started onto the right road of recovery.
So it sounds like, Kelly, you had no external injuries. Everything that happened to you from that accident was internal. And now we have concussion protocols. If I am not a medical person, but would it be fair to say in 2015, those concussion protocols were either not known or at least the medical staff you were with did not use those concussion protocols with you?
Well, concussion protocols are used for young students in schools, and athletes. So they're not applied to your general regular person who's in a car accident. And there are a lot of physicians that are not aware of concussions and their consequences. And in fact, um, concussion medicine, brain injury medicine, is just being born. It's only about 3 years old, and it is a specialty that physical medicine and rehab doctors go to for that extra certificate in education and training. So a lot is not known about concussions. We do know that it doesn't depend on how the person gets their concussion, how severe it is, doesn't dictate a lot about their recovery. So there's people who have had brain injuries and in comas, and they walk away from the injury and do well. And then there's people who have a mild concussion similar to mine, and they end up having their life spiral down from loss of job, loss of marriage, alcohol and drug abuse, and then ending up being incarcerated. So it's really the knowledge and the information isn't really out there, and that's my goal, is to kind of educate the public through my YouTube channel and my video content about concussions, and then provide strategies and tools and coping mechanisms that people can use to get back to work and have a successful transition back into work. And that's why I ended up writing my book, After the Crash: How to Keep Your Job, Stay in School, and Live Life After a Brain Injury.
So you had a mild concussion, and is it fair to say that was not diagnosed until you had the brain scan? Is that the cause and effect part of your concussion and determining it was a concussion?
Well, originally it was just a diagnosis of concussion and post-concussion syndrome, which means I had a concussion and my symptoms lasted longer than 3 months, a month to 3 months. My original brain CT, head CT, was negative, did not show anything. And those tests usually only show gross abnormalities like a skull fracture, or tumor, or a bleed. And then I had an MRI done, and it showed some spots of old blood, but there wasn't anything that really said brain injury. So how the radiologist and the neurologist read it was that these slight changes they saw on the MRI were non-specific. So I still didn't really get a lot of answers. And then finally, I saw a behavioral neurologist, and he did a functional MRI, which is not normally done. This is a doctor that works and does research on brain injuries, and that MRI was more detailed and showed more changes, such as diffuse axon injury. And that's when the nerve cells, they have these little branches, they reach out to each other and talk. And with a brain injury, those can get severed. And so that did show up on that scan, but not everyone gets that. So I'm a neurology nurse practitioner. And so when I have a patient who's had a concussion, I tell them, even though their MRI or their head CT is negative, it doesn't mean that they haven't suffered from a brain injury. It's based on your symptoms, such as difficulty with word finding, speech, behavioral personality changes, difficulty in reading, your vision, hearing changes, sound sensitivity, light sensitivity, and mood changes. So a patient can have more anxiety or depression after a head injury, and then headaches and sleep difficulty.
So, Kelly, did you have these symptoms?
Yes, so I had short-term memory difficulty. I had sound sensitivity, light sensitivity. I had difficulty with speech. I had difficulty with focus and attention. I had visual difficulties, and I wasn't able to track things as they moved. So I got neurotherapy to help me with tracking movement of objects. Because my vision was off, I had difficulty maintaining my balance, and I did have some falls. Um, and originally, when I slept, I had some insomnia and what is known as fragmented sleep, where you're able to fall asleep, but you wake up in the middle of the night and then you're unable to go back to sleep for an hour or two. Um, and my personality changed, and I had difficulty with my mood modulation. So I would get really irritable and angry more easily than I had before my head injury.
So you were recovering from two separate aspects, it sounds. One is the brain injury, which was manifested as a mild concussion, but then you were also recovering from the PTSD of the accident. Am I processing that correctly, Kelly?
Yes, just for a little bit. I had um, fear of driving. And I also was having car accident related nightmares for several months after the car accident.
All right. Now, I have heard, and I want to make sure our listeners know that I am, I guess you might say, the antithesis of a medical person, but I have heard, and I think I've read of some people who, over a period of time, the brain can recover from these type injuries. Is that a somewhat of a natural process, albeit it takes time, or from just focusing only on the brain injury part, how did you recover?
Yes, for sure. We're learning more about this thing called neuroplasticity. And that's where the brain remaps and reconnects and heals from the injury. And that can be enhanced with quality sleep. So, getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep at night, eating a brain healthy diet. So, food that's low in saturated fats and low in processed foods, more like whole foods, like eating an orange rather than drinking orange juice, or eating olives rather than having olive oil on your salad. Um, and exercise. Exercise, when you exercise, it increases brain chemicals that enhance the healing and the neuroplasticity. And let's see, mindfulness. So, mindfulness, being in the moment. So one of the things that, with brain injury survivors is they tend to stay in their heads, and they live with anxiety, fear, and worry. And they sometimes will ruminate on negative thoughts like, I can't do this anymore, or I used to be better before smarter before my head injury. Mindfulness pulls the head injury survivor out of their own head and puts it in the moment where they're sitting. And to practice, you can do things like sit outside, listen to the birds, look at the trees, note the leaves, the colors, just really focusing and being in that moment. And then if you get a thought, you just acknowledge it, and then you let it go. Like, um, I'm not smart because I have a head injury, and you could say that's not true, and push it away. And other ways that you can practice mindfulness is adult coloring, doing crafts like knitting or crocheting, going on walks, practicing yoga. And I recommend for my patients chair yoga because of the issue with balance. Chair yoga is just as effective as regular yoga, except you have support for your balance and you don't necessarily need to get down on the floor if you're unable to get up off the floor because of injuries. And so those are kind of the foundations of supporting and promoting that neuroplasticity. And then when you've recovered enough, where a lot of your brain injury symptoms are well controlled, then you can start adding on learning and being social. And those things enhance neuroplasticity and brain health too.
Did your employer work with you during your neuroplasticity? I'm going to use the term recovery, or were you not able to function mentally the way you used to? And I'm very curious if you had to be laid off for a period of time. I mean, that's a financial consequence.
Exactly. And it's a common consequence after a brain injury. So fortunately though, a brain injury is an invisible disability. It's kind of a double-edged sword. You can choose to hide it or to share it with your employer. And I chose to hide it for about 5 years with my employer because I wasn't working in a supportive environment. And then when 2020 hit and I was being moved and deployed into different jobs for the pandemic, I ended up getting injured and it set me back on with my brain healing. And that's when I decided I think it's time to let the employer know they have a disabled employee. And I can't do it all. I'm really good at what I do, but I can't do everything.
That's interesting that you can hide this brain injury, even though you have all the other effects from the a brain injury, that you can mask it, so to speak. That's it.
Yes, and yeah, and it takes a lot of energy to do it. After a brain injury, the brain doesn't run as efficiently, and so it burns up your energy more quickly with minor activities. So a brain injury survivor who chooses to mask their symptoms spends a lot of their energy covering it up. And what you don't see is that after I left work, I went to bed. I drove home and I went to bed. I slept 2 hours. I got up for 1 hour to get ready for the next day. And then I went back to sleep and didn't get up until I had to again. And then on the weekends, I slept 12 to 14 hours at night with an additional nap in the middle of the day. And I did that for the first 2 years into the third year.
Mm.
And I missed out on my raising my young kids, and I missed out on social gatherings because I just didn't have the energy to do it. I didn't have the mental or the physical energy to do it. And when you overdo it when you're recovering from a brain injury, it makes your brain injury symptoms worse, makes your headaches worse, your dizziness, your mood worse. So while you're recovering, you're balancing doing what you have to do with also supporting your brain's healing.
I'm very curious about masking this, Kelly. I appreciate what you're saying, but yet it would seem your supervisors, others who work with you regularly, would notice something. Slurred speech. I don't know that that is a result at all. Your your capacity to work is not the same as it used to be. You're something of that nature, it would seem. And you're masking a lot of this, but yet it would seem others would see that, well, Kelly, there's something happening here? I mean, am I off track here, Kelly, or I'm not even sure how to process what I'm thinking.
Well, there's tools, there's compensatory tools that you can use to support your brain's performance while you're at work. For instance, taking notes and carrying the notes with you in your pocket so you can look at them as you need it. I did have like words that were difficult. If I had a word or a patient name that was difficult to say, I would practice it before I saw that person. I would write it down. And then when I met with that person, I would look down at the word and be able to say it. I would slow down my speech if I needed to speak and make sure it was clear. But to be honest, I became much of a better listener and less of a talker. And I think people at work like that.
All right. So no, that's very interesting. Compensatory. You knew exactly over some period of time, you knew what you're no longer able to do. You compensated for that. I'm very curious. Are you fully recovered from that neural transformation, or is this a lifetime thing that you'll be dealing with?
I would have to say that every year brings improvement. But I do still have difficulty with focus and attention. I do have light sensitivity under fluorescent lights. Now, before I had light sensitivity from computer screens, the TV, any kind of light. And now it's just fluorescent lights. And I have sound sensitivity, and it used to, sounds used to cause headaches and irritability. Now the sound sensitivity is more of I don't have the ability to block out sounds while I'm focusing and concentrating at work. So I have for many years used noise canceling earbuds and headphones, and that has really helped out a lot. So just I do still have some, oh, and I still have fatigue, that chronic fatigue. It's called neurofatigue. Um, but it's a lot less than it was before. I don't need 12 hours or 14 hours of sleep at night. Now I just need 8 to 9. So it's all kind of, I still have some symptoms, but they are quite well, they're a lot easier these days to control than they were, of course, in the beginning.
Is there brain activity? And what I'm trying to lead up to, are there mental exercises? I'm just thinking something as simple as crossword puzzles, something of that nature. Is that a part of the brain healing, or am I totally off track?
It depends on where someone is in their recovery. If they're early in their recovery and they get tired easily with reading, or they're not able to stay awake after work, then that person shouldn't be using their cognitive energy on brain games and word finding. Once you get to the point where you're able to stay up after work, you're able to kind of get back into your hobbies or your family responsibilities and social, then you can start considering um, enhancing the function of your brain through cognitive challenging your brain cognitively. I'm not a real big fan of word finding or crossword puzzles. They're good, but you can it's a routine. So the brain does like routine. It does like being in a rut. But in order to challenge it, to grow, to create more connections, you have to push it out of its comfort zone. And that could be as easily as trying a new recipe, going to a new restaurant, or as big as traveling to a different country or learning a different language or instrument. So it has to be learning something new. If you really want to expand your cognitive functioning, really encourage the growth of your brain and fight back against aging, then it's all about being social and learning new things that challenge you out of your basic normal things that you do.
All right. Now, you're wearing headphones during this interview, and our listeners don't know that, but we know by virtue of the video. But do you anticipate having to use headphones for the rest of your life, or is this a part of the neurotransformative process that maybe eventually you'll be able to eliminate headphones? And I'm not suggesting there's anything at all wrong with headphones. That's not my point. But it appears you're using headphones now as a compensatory measure. I'm wondering if at any point you believe you'll have the option whether you choose to use headphones or not.
Well, I'm using these headphones because they create excellent sound for your podcast. I'm not using them as I would normally use them at work to help me focus. So I'm only using my noise canceling headphones now at work, and if I'm going to be in a loud environment. Now, before, earlier in my recovery, I used them at home also to diminish the noises, but I've been able to grow my filters to be stronger and to work better. But I do use my noise canceling headphones and earbuds when I travel because flying the engine's really loud. If and Having to hear constant conversations will wear me out if it's, if you're flying, sometimes you're out traveling for like 6, 8 hours, 12 hours, depending on where you're going. And if I don't have to use my energy to filter out the noises, that saves more energy for me to have when I get to my destination. So I often wear them like that for that reason. Now, for the future, I don't know because I've had a lot of improvement, as I said, incrementally over the years. So each year brings a new kind of step in the recovery. So I don't know what's going to be in the future. I mean, if you told me after my car accident I was going to write a book and write content for videos and create videos, I would have never believed it.
Let's focus on the trauma of the accident. Do you just know how to deal with trauma? And I'm guessing, and Marty has been through a head-on collision, but there's still times that she can have mental flashbacks and activations and so forth. Have you overcome the trauma of it, or do you sometimes fear driving? I'm curious how that trauma has affected you.
Well, I started journaling my recovery. I am a big proponent of journaling, and that helps you get negative thoughts out of your mind onto the paper, get a better perspective of your thoughts and worries. So that was very helpful with my recovery. And I also had therapy with a psychiatrist, psychologist, and counselors throughout the year that would also help with that. And I do recommend if you're having trouble to seek help and seek the advice of a professional, or even just talking to supportive friends and family has been really helpful. Um, the Every once in a while, if I have a car that pulls out in front of me or scares me on the road, I sometimes that evening will have a nightmare of being in a car that is crashing into things. But that's gotten rarer and rarer as the years have progressed.
So, in the 9 years since this tragic accident occurred, you documented all of this in a book, in your book, and And a part of that is how you two can recover, the you two meaning the reader, how the reader can recover from the effects of brain injury and trauma. What is your book, the title of your book, Kelly, and how would our listeners get a copy?
It's After the Crash, How to Keep Your Job, Stay in School, and Live Life After a Brain Injury. And you can find my book on my website at kellytuttle.org. It's also available on Amazon in book form and in an ebook form, which I'm currently having a sale on it right now. And my book is also on Audible because after a brain injury, it can be difficult to read and memorize. So it was really important for my book to be something someone could listen to rather than read. And so, yes, it's on Audible, and it's me. I read it. So I hope that your listeners, if they're interested, they check it out and enjoy it.
Do you work with people in a coaching capacity, therapy, whatever the term may be?
Well, right now I'm a full-time neurology nurse practitioner, and so I do help people who have had traumatic brain injuries, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, strokes, and my patients benefit from my experience and being there and done that and have the T-shirt. I find that I'm an excellent ambassador in being able to translate their symptoms into words and then to help them find the right specialist to help them with that symptom. And in my book, I do go over common brain injury symptoms and I talk about the specialists to go see to help you with those symptoms. And then I also have a section on strategies and tools, and that again it goes into those symptoms and the tools and strategies I use to help cope with those symptoms, so you can be successful at work and school.
I wanted to ask you, you said the brain regrows, regenerates, for lack of better words. But the person that's been on drugs for a long time, I'm assuming, I'm not medical, that they are affecting the brain. The brain is being damaged. And yet, once they've come off and they seem just fine. Is that true? They go through the same process that you went through to help the brain, like you said, do something new, do something you've never done so that you're constantly learning. Is that what they do?
That I cannot answer because I haven't worked with patients with chemical dependency.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no
Kelly,
problem.
our listeners, I think what you're or one of my takes is do not treat any let's say head injury lightly. Don't dismiss it, but do get some testing. And we talked very early in this message about concussion protocols, but are there concussion protocols for other than athletes? I guess that's a question I would ask.
No, there isn't, and it is important to get every head strike, um, every automobile accident, where the bags are deployed. So a brain injury can happen from a fall, it can happen from impact, it can happen through blast waves from a bomb. It happens with acceleration and deceleration of the body or the head. And then there's other types of brain injuries that aren't from trauma, such as a stroke, hypoxia, not getting oxygen to the brain, like with a drowning, my carbon monoxide or lead poisoning. All those individuals need help, and um, it's I often recommend with my patients to journal their symptoms and their recovery so they can get to know them and then better articulate those symptoms to be evaluated by their doctor and do follow-ups because sometimes the patient isn't aware of their limitations or that there is an issue going on. And to always take a family or a friend to the appointment to help remember what was said and recommended, and to also kind of give input of what they're seeing, what's going on with the patient. And the other thing too is if your readers, your listeners go to my website, kellytuttle.org, I have a free download of I call a medical cheat sheet. Basically, it's a paper you can fill out the questions I put on there and take that to your appointment so you can remember what to say when you do get there. And the questions are exactly what the provider or therapist is going to want to know to help figure out your diagnosis and what treatment or therapies you need. And then it has a little area where you can write what the provider recommended and when you're supposed to follow up next.
Well, Kelly, on behalf of our listeners, I want to thank you for sharing with us. It's unfortunate that you had to experience what you did, but you're making the very best by passing forward what you're learning from this, through this, to benefit our listeners. I want to encourage our listeners to go to kellytuttle.org to download what you just mentioned, purchase your book, and let's help others recover from and advance beyond any head injuries, any traumas that others may experience. There is a life after. Kelly, you're clearly exhibiting that.
Thank you. Yes, that is definitely it. I want people to know that there is hope and that they're not alone.
Thank you. And that's a very poignant message right there, Kelly. You're not alone. We're all in this together. We want to reach out and help. Do not isolate. Kelly, thank you so much for sharing.
Well, thank you for having me.
We appreciate having the opportunity to share our and our guests' life experiences with you.
The Cooper culture advances organizations to achieve and sustain high retention rates, connected communication, and trust through personality insights and principled leadership. You can contact us at our website, thecooperculture.com, and you can contact us directly at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at thecooperculture.com. We work with you to help assess aspects of your culture to advance the environment and people to their best performance. We do that through our staff of certified personal performance coaches, leadership trainers, keynote speakers, and disc personality behavior experts. You can book a speaking engagement directly through our website by contacting us at ron@thecooperculture.com. We look forward to sharing our life experiences with you, some of which are profound, some of which are pretty funny. Some of those life experiences are ones we'll never do that again because we've been through stuff. We truly look forward to working with you, speaking with you, helping advance you in any way that we can.